Goanna, large lizard, ruled the vast land around what is now the Murray River. The land was dry and there were no rivers flowing through it. The harsh weather caused the trees to wither, and other animals fell into a state of depletion due to drought and lack of water, while all other creatures struggled with thirst and were on the brink of death from lack of drinking water. Only the Goannas remained healthy, full of life, and well-nourished. This stark difference led the other animals to suspect that the Goannas were hiding a secret water source that they were not sharing. Rumors began to spread, suggesting that the Goannas might be secretly using an underground water source and keeping it to themselves. This created tension among the creatures in the area. Even the wives of the Goannas felt ashamed and angry with their husbands for their selfishness. They could not accept that other animals were dying each day while their husbands kept the water for themselves. Despite having only a small amount of water, these wives still tried to share with other creatures. They were not only heartbroken by witnessing the death of the plants and animals, but also enraged by the injustice and greed of their husbands. Eventually, the wives confronted their husbands and begged them to share the water and reveal its hidden location. They pleaded, hoping that the Goanna males would think about the survival of all creatures. However, their pleas were not answered. Still, the wives did not give up. They believed that the secret water source was hidden somewhere in the mountains, but because of the rocky terrain, they could not track their husbands to find the water's location. They could not follow the Goanna males through the rocky terrain. The wives decided that the only way to discover the secret water source was for one brave woman to stay overnight in the mountains where they believed the water was hidden. However, many of the women hesitated and were afraid. They believed that evil spirits inhabited the mountains and would capture or harm anyone who dared to venture in. Despite this, one brave young wife volunteered for the dangerous task. She believed that if she could find the water, she would save not only her sisters, but all the creatures dying from thirst. With great determination and quiet sacrifice, she packed her possum skin cloak, some water, and food, and set off for the mountains. She climbed to the top and spent the night in the quiet darkness. When dawn broke, she woke up to find herself surrounded by a group of tiny beings. They were the Tonis, tiny warrior helpers of the gods. The group leader reassured her, saying they meant no harm and were there to guide her to the secret water source. Without hesitation, the young woman followed them through the winding paths of the mountain. When they reached the hidden water reservoir, she drank until she could drink no more. She then asked the leader how she could bring the water back to save the dying creatures. The leader told her to return to her sisters and lead them to safety in the hills to the south, then come back for further instructions. Secret water source in the mountains, the young wife knew her journey was not over. She returned to the camp to inform her sisters and led them to the safer southern hills, away from the reach of the Goanna males. The women quickly left their former home and found higher ground, avoiding the impending disaster. Having completed the first task, the brave wife returned to the mountains where the Tonis were waiting. This time, they gave her the final instructions, a sacred act that would release the water for the entire land. They told her to use a yam stick, a sacred object used in traditional ceremonies, to thrust it deep into the side of the mountain. After doing so, she was to run for her life. Without hesitation, the young woman summoned all her strength and faith, raised the yam stick high, and drove it forcefully into the mountain. Immediately, a loud roar echoed from the earth. She turned and ran as fast as she could, her feet gliding across the rocks as though guided by the spirits of her ancestors. Behind her, a thunderous sound reverberated through the sky, the sound of water bursting forth from the broken mountain. A massive surge of water began to gush out, flowing forcefully down the valley, sweeping away everything in its path and eventually joining a larger river, which later became the Murray River. Thanks to the courageous and wise actions of the young wife, the barren land finally received water, nurturing all life. When the Goanna males returned after a period of absence, they were horrified to find that their camp had been submerged in the raging waters. The huts, once their territory, were now just debris floating along the newly created river. They searched everywhere for their wives, but the wives had disappeared without a trace. Fear and regret began to overwhelm them. After some time searching, they finally discovered their wives on the opposite bank of the river in the southern hills. The Goanna males called out and begged their wives to return, promising to change and make amends. But the wives remained unmoved. They had endured too much, from selfishness and coldness to witnessing the death of so many creatures due to their husbands' greed. Now that the water had been released and all creatures could live, they no longer wanted to return to their old lives.